This is Fam Electric Ghost. We're on the air with Anna Shilina. And welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing great and yeah, excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you for having me.
Now, we love to talk to people from all over the world. You're in South Africa. That's really cool that the technology allows us to talk together. But a couple of questions we ask any guest before we get to the heart of your story is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Wow, I love how you go right to the heart of it. What motivates me and why do I do what I do? Essentially, I know what it's like to live from a place of density and darkness. And
Mm.
I know what it's like to live from a place of light and expansion. And I much prefer the light and expansion um, side of things. And sometimes we move through density, and that's part of the human experience. But why I do what I do, like set myself free from habits, set other people free from limiting habits, is so that we can live more and more from a place of expansion and light and help other people do that. And all comes down to my story, like I said, like what I experienced and knowing how difficult it can be when you're in that place of struggling with limiting habits and knowing that it is possible to break free. I remember looking for stories of other people who had helped themselves and gotten to the other side, and that would inspire me to get to the other side of my darker days. And now I get to be the person that I once needed to be, and that's what inspires me every day.
So it's interesting that you work with high performers and the need to break habits or get better relationship coaching. And as a in my day job, like I'm an analyst in IT, but then I do this podcast. I've been doing it since 2016. I've talked to over 1,000 people, and
Wow.
what I find is, when you talk to people and they're telling their story, it's like a master class in humanity, and I've kind of seen some consistent themes with people dealing with imposter syndrome, people dealing with they're just maybe they're just overachievers, or they just are caught up in loops, like of these loops that they can't get out of, and then they need
Yes.
help, and they find that they hit the wall, and they hear a
Hmm.
crash, and suddenly they can't solve it by themselves, that they've got to do some kind of work that to get out of the loop.
Mm. Yeah. I often, I used to have a lot of judgment on myself because I have been in the personal development space for like 20 years, and I knew all the theory and I had all of the answers theoretically, but some of the times when even though I knew better, I couldn't help myself. I had a lot of criticism and judgment on myself, right? Like, why do I keep getting stuck in these limiting habits? And do I repeat these patterns that are making me unhappy and unhealthy and all these things? And it wasn't until I really recognized that the point is to ask for help. The point is to get mentorship. And we might know everything theoretically, but sometimes it is about aligning with other people, whether it's a coach or a friend or a community
Hmm.
that that opens something up in you as a human being, because at the end of the day we're all here to relate and to have relationships with other people, whether it's in business, personal lives. All comes down to relationships. And that's why I founded the Relating Academy, because I was like, oh, relationships, that's the point of life, that's
Yeah.
everything that it comes down to. And so I tried so hard to fix my limiting habits and addictions on my own, and it wasn't until I surrendered to the idea that I needed help and I needed other people and I needed to lean on my relationships that I had the breakthroughs that I did have.
It's really interesting because, like, I think like a lot of times, like, if you're in the space where you're like either a caregiver or you're somebody that's a therapist, like you have to also like consider like you're getting overloaded, with all these other people's issues, and maybe sometimes like you push your own down.
Mm,
And I've talked to like therapists, like psychotherapists. They have to continually meet with other people themselves to keep themselves like
absolutely.
in a good state. And if you're a nurse, it's like you got to keep from having like burnout because like you're in an emergency room. That's a very stressful situation. You can crash, and
Yes.
people are starting to recognize like you have to take care of your
Mm,
caregivers because if you
yeah.
don't, they can crash, and they can't just be super people and just like suck it up. Because
Yeah, it's such an important thing to manage our states as coaches, as service providers who do help in really difficult situations. Because if our cup isn't full and we aren't able to then give from an empty cup, right? So my primary responsibility is actually to fill my cup and make sure that I'm in the most aligned state that I can be, whether that's journaling, meditation, doing fun things, connecting with people that are good and healthy for me, looking after my body and health and all those things are really important for my job and for what I get to do for other people. And it's all encompassing. It's like a sometimes it feels like being an elite athlete, and I'm not comparing it to elite athleticism. I know that's like a whole other ball game, but the point is like everything in your lifestyle contributes to everything else.
yeah, it's very
And that
interconnected.
alignment is very important.
It's interconnected. Like I always talk to people about like the pillars of being a human, right? So the problem is some people look at their physical pillar, right? They like their physical state, and they'll get in prime physical condition, six pack abs, low body fat, but then they don't pay attention to like their mental state or kind of their other like their nutrition might be out of balance to just focus on just having the six pack abs and the proteins and all kinds of things. But then they get like it's too extreme, right? I talked to a
Mm.
coach that was like physical coach, right? And he looked perfect, but when he looked in the looking glass, he didn't feel like what he looked like. And people couldn't understand it, and he couldn't understand it. And then he had to realize that just working on the body wasn't enough. He had
Mm.
to work on something else. And so people get out of balance because they don't take care of their nutrition, they don't take care of their sleep. They do things to an extreme to get to a certain result, and then wonder why things are holistic. There's a lot of inputs and outputs and cascading effects, and if you don't kind of look at like you make a decision or a non-decision, it can have cascading effects, and people don't want to
Mm.
look at that because they get tunnel vision, right? And then they don't see the whole.
Yeah, the compound interest of the little decisions is incredible, actually. There's this book called Slight Edge. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it. And they emphasize how, it's the small incremental decisions and habits and things that we choose to do that add up. A lot of the time we're looking for like really big changes in our lives, like, oh, but just, the New Year's resolution, or I'll start this on Monday or next month or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it's the small incremental changes that add up for us.
Yeah, it's what's sustainable because you see people, today
Yeah.
there's a lot of fads because we live in like the information age. So people want like the 10 steps, 30 days. What can I do in the next 8 hours? Like things are so quick and attention spans are so limited, right?
Hmm.
So people want the immediate reaction. Like
Yeah,
they
the
have
immediate gratification, the art of delaying gratification, and I write about this in my book Habit Freedom, is the art of delaying gratification is going to get you to your goals, at the end of the day. But we're so inundated with the opportunities for immediate gratification, whether it's on our phones, whether it's like some kind of quick hack to do something. And so to really take radical responsibility for the skill of delaying gratification is a huge first step for many people on this journey.
Because I think also there's like the perfection trap and the comparison trap. Like I run into this as an artist, like as a producer. You get people like they want to clone what's big. They want to be like Taylor Swift or Kendrick Lamar. Well, they're already there, right?
Yeah.
So the whole is like your secret sauce to me is you. Yeah, if I
Mhm.
see an artist, it's like I want to focus on the thing that is very unique in your voice, like the demo you're scared to show anybody, right? Because
Yeah.
that is more like you than instead of you trying to like mimic somebody else. There already is
Mm.
there, right? And so the permission structure to actually be yourself is very revolutionary. Like in the arts, you see it, like where you get like a Bob
Mhm.
Dylan, where you get a
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix, a Jim Morrison, because they actually leaned into something that was uniquely in their vision that was radically different than what other people were doing. And so
Mm.
a lot of times, if you do that, people initially don't like it. People initially will say, and you might feel unsafe. You might feel a little scared because you're not just replicating the canon like in the arts. It's like, oh, I'm not just being Shakespeare. I'm not just doing something that was already done. I'm not trying to be Orson Welles. What is already Orson Welles, right? Like what are you trying to? You can be inspired, but
Mhm.
we see a lot of cloning, a lot of copying because
Mm.
people don't feel good enough about themselves to be their own vision.
When I see that come up with a client when they have that imposter syndrome and they don't feel good enough or they're not quite giving themselves permission, I often ask them, like, who's your favorite artist or your favorite band or your favorite musician or like, someone you really admire and look up to? And they'll say like, oh, I really like, for example, I these days I really love the musician Ren. And then I'm like, well, imagine if that guy or that girl didn't give themselves permission and sat in their imposter syndrome and let it consume you, how much poorer the world and your world would be if they did that. So it's
And
like
it's like
you are that person to someone else, and by playing small and by not giving yourself that permission to be fully you and shine your unique light, whatever however quirky that looks, you are taking that away from someone else. And that penny often drops for people when they see it. It's like, oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
i
if
wouldn't
you
i
listen.
wouldn't want to be without that person's gift in the world.
It's like if you listen to somebody, like I've had therapists talk about, like you tape somebody in a session and you have them hear their own voice, and you hear how
Mm,
many like can'ts or I can't or won't or they're I can never all this bad self talk when they actually hear it, because sometimes they'll speak it, they don't hear themselves. There's like a
yes.
listening skill to listen to somebody else, but then there's also a listening skill to actually listen to yourself, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't really.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, they don't have that looking glass self. The Victorians kind of had this idea that the
Mhm,
great they William, Keats and Wordsworth and Blake and all of them were taught Lord Byron. They had this idea of the
mhm,
looking glass self, and you're like self examination, and you
mhm,
and you really try to dive deep and get to that other you, and then
mhm,
figure out like why are you that other person, and is that person is you, and they dive into that kind of concept of that you can have these shaded selves, right, or pieces of yourself that you can start to look at and say, why am I doing this? Psychology goes into it deeper, but the artist kind of uses it. Oh, that's something I can use to create art. I can use my
mm,
trauma to actually create art and work through it and get to the other side of it, which is that's always kind of appealed to me as a creative, is how I can go into my vulnerabilities and then
mhm,
put them out into the world. And that's where I
mhm,
think where the unique artists are able to tap into that and
mhm,
as like the muse and
mhm,
hold the inside and the outside and then present it and people say, oh, I felt like that. So there's singer songwriters, they get into that vibe, people pick up on it and they draw into it and pull their own story. When they hear a song, they apply it to their life, right? What they've found in it. And so as a storyteller, that's you want to be able to get that out there, so because that's how you connect to humanity, by telling those
mhm.
stories that have resonate, right? And if you don't give yourself permission, then it just stays in your head or stays in your journal and it never gets out to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, at the end of the day, The world is a reflection of us and where we are at. And if we want to see a certain change in the world, I mean, it's that Michael Jackson song, right? Like, in the mirror.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So looking glass, he kind of got in that idea.
exactly. It's about, starting within, starting with yourself, because there's no one else you can control. It's only you, right? And so, with the coaching that I do with habits, for example, I have people like, oh, can I help my brother change his habits, or my dad, or my uncle, or whatever? And I'm like, no, it's about helping yourself change your habits first. And then if they are inspired by your story, and you're modeling something that they want to achieve as well, that's how you make the change. I have a client I'm working with right now, and she was surprised, like 3 weeks into the program, the Habit Freedom program, working with like food habits, like some of her friends, they stopped drinking, started eating healthier. And like, it was so amazing to see her step into her leadership, almost
Yeah,
just by changing her own habits. She didn't have to go and get a megaphone and shout from the rooftops, like, this is what you need to do, this is what I'm doing. All she had to do was honor herself, focus on her own health, do what she knew was important to her. And then those who would resonate with it and wanted to come along for the journey did so. And other people got triggered by it the other way and, aren't as close anymore. And that's okay. That's
yeah.
part
You
of
fall
life.
off. It's like law of attraction. Like I always felt the law of attraction is like if you resonate at a certain frequency. You said I'm a synthesis, but the idea, like oscillate, resonate at a frequency, it gets into harmony, or you
Mm-hmm.
can get into distortion, or you can go
Mm-hmm.
into dissonance, or you can go into noise, from like
Yeah.
music terms, right? But if you think about people have frequencies, like you pick up that vibe, you walk in a room, and somebody's got this agitated vibe, and immediately, without even saying a word, you sometimes you can pick up on it. You can actually feel this person seems agitated. They haven't even said anything, but you can kind of feel it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like so if you can resonate with people who are like in your frequency, like so if you are doing better with your life, like you start to lead by example,
Mm-hmm.
people around you will feel it, and you don't even have to be like telling them what to do. Like you said, they see that you're eating right, then they say, well, maybe I should do that, and if they respect you and they look up to you and they see what you're doing, like leading by example, people will start to follow. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, people will come around and say, well, I'm
Not
not going to,
everybody on that note,
not
obviously not
everybody. Yeah,
everybody,
yeah,
but
but certain
those
people.
who are inspired to do that. And it's also not your responsibility to, necessarily lead everyone around you. But at the end of the day, people, if your way works, you're modeling something that they too want, whether it's a better health, better relationships, more wealth, and then they will also raise up to the frequency or not, and that's okay.
Yeah, because you might lose people, because
Yeah.
like I was a cancer survivor when I told some of my
Wow.
closest friends when I was 27 or 57. I was
Wow.
very surprised that some of the people couldn't handle it and I didn't expect them. And then people who I wouldn't have thought that would stick with me did stick with me. So you never know who people really are till you hit some crucible moments. So some people
Mhm.
couldn't handle it and they disappeared. Other people I
Interesting.
thought that would be like that, they stuck around. They're still here. And so you never really know. And some people drop off, some people don't. It's like it's not my responsibility to go and say, well, like you can't handle it. Well, I didn't dive into why they couldn't handle it, and some of them came back later. I was like, let them just figure it out. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
pressure it, but yeah, it's like life is that way. I think sometimes people want control of the other because they think the other is actually triggering them for some reason. And when it's like you got to get control of your triggers.
Yes, because we think it seems to be easier if I just help you. I'll help you. It's easier than helping myself, but that's an illusion, right? We're not actually ever helping someone else unless we're truly helping ourselves first. And so, on the topic of lasting change, that could only happen for ourselves within, when we really commit to ourselves, commit to that mastery, commit to that self-respect. Self-respect is a huge part of habit freedom because you really have to learn to keep promises to yourself and respect yourself on such a deep level. I think we've been taught often that, we can respect other people and other authorities, but then we can self-abandon and not respect our own well-being sometimes,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, I
that
think a
always
lot.
comes
Yeah,
back to bite us in the ass.
yeah, definitely. Because I think a lot of times we're told like, we're given people in the canons, right? We're learned as a kid Shakespeare and Darwin and all these people, and then Einstein's like, well, I can't be Einstein. I can't be Shakespeare. I can't be like you're told is like all these people who are just amazing, right? And so what's
Mhm.
if you so the it's like you're never given this idea of like you could how many of your teachers or professors or people around you outers are actually telling you you could be like that. They how many people are actually trying to lift you up and giving you permission to say no, you could do that. I mean, you get somebody, oh, you're going to be president. It's like, okay, fine. But like most of the people tend to say, well, you're not going to hit that level. You got to aspire, but you don't actually get people a lot of times. I had some really good teachers that did say you could do it. You can think out of the box. You, but it was kind of few and far between people who were pushing that. It was more
Mm.
the other things like, oh no, you just like stay in the box.
I remember one of the first times when I was confused that my friends at the time weren't happy for my success and weren't happy for, like, I was doing quite well. And it was really hurtful. I was like, oh, it's weird. Like, why don't we all celebrate it and we all get to win, right? If I'm winning, you're winning. If it's in my field, it's in your field because we're these vibrational creatures. And then I realized, if someone is in survival mode and they are struggling with their own things, like very dense, very heavy things, it is almost impossible for them to be happy or supportive of someone winning. Right.
Mm,
So it has actually nothing to do with me or you or anyone, but it's just a reflection like, look, they're not in the place to be happy for themselves or for anyone else. And that was quite, I guess, it gave me some peace
hmm
where I was like, okay, well, and compassion. Actually, the word I'm looking for is compassion, because I'm like, okay, it's not about me. It's more like, I really hope that you find your way and that you find your own success and your own winning, because at the end of the day, that's when we can be happy for each other and with each other. Just have to make sure that my sorry, I just got a notification that my computer might.
your battery's down.
Yeah, there you go. But it should
Yes.
be on now.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that would be bad.
yeah, hopefully. Okay. Um, so yeah, that kind of like, instead of looking at it like, why aren't they happy for me? I started looking at it, how can have compassion for them?
Like
It changed
empathy.
the narrative in my head completely.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't understand um the vulnerabilities and the resentments people have, and they get surprised like they have a best friend and you're winning awards, you're getting your master's degree, you get your doctorate, you get the position, and then they're not so happy for you. It's like, oh, I would expect this person so close to me. They would be
Yeah.
the first cheerleader. And but it's like you have to understand the empathy. It's like what's going on in their life, and maybe they can't they can't process it. They can't be there for you, right? They're just not in the state to be there for you, and maybe that's okay. It's like it's okay for them to be there and understands like whether maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we have a heart to heart discussion. We kind of get into like what's going on with them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where are they? Right? You want people to be where you want them to be, but they are where they are. And I think that's the big, like, you have that with your microcosm relationships and macrocosm relationships. People have aspire, they have these idealism. That I want
Mm-hmm.
my soulmate's going to solve all my problems. This group of people, we're going to just be fantastic and get this thing together. but we're not actually working or listening in the room.
Mm.
I mean, in like IT, we're in design sessions, and like the whole team's supposed to be doing something, and maybe only 2 people out of 10 are actually putting all the work in. And you're like, well, where's everybody else? So it's like people
Yeah.
are where they are. It's like maybe they needed help before we got put them in the room. Maybe
Mm.
we had an expectation they would do it, but we
Yeah.
actually didn't read
On
them.
that note, expectations often lead to disappointments. And in fact, when we are disappointed with other people, I often invite clients to look at, well, what were the expectations that you had that led to the disappointment? Because without expectations, you cannot have a disappointment.
Yeah,
And we do layer on a lot of expectations onto the people in our lives often without even being aware of it. And then, we experience these disappointments. But what radical responsibility looks like is seeing, oh, I'm experiencing a disappointment. I'm sad because XYZ didn't happen. And instead of blaming it on the other person, how can I turn it around and look at it from the lens of like, well, how did I contribute to feeling this disappointment by placing these expectations? And I had this reminder recently where I was like, I had a disappointment. I felt disappointed, and I was like, well, it's my responsibility to feel disappointed or not. And then I was like, well, what would the narrative be? How would I look at it differently if I saw as everything as a plus and I removed those expectations? And that changed that relationship immediately, and the way we connected and spoke and related, just because I decided that it's my responsibility whether I'm disappointed or not.
yeah. I think people get into these patterns, and like they have the perfection trap. I run into like with some artists, right? So they're sitting there like doing 100 takes to try to get to something perfect. But what has happened over time is like historically, a lot of artists will point out that the earlier takes of a project, the earlier versions, sometimes are closer to the heart of what you wanted to do, but they might have imperfections or happy accidents. And you might have
Mm-hmm.
had an idea that should be this, should be X, but it's Y, right? And it wasn't what you originally wanted. And some of the great artists is actually let that go and you say, "Hey, maybe I'll do like modal jazz or improvisational jazz or fusion, where you could have an idea and you could have this like, well, this is a bad note, and somebody else could say, no, it's not a bad note, it's an opportunity to evolve the song, right? Because
Mm.
they had the set idea, and I've run into it with authors. They had a set outline, set structure, and then halfway through the project, this idea comes to them like flow state, and then they go, "That's actually better than what I planned." But do you
Wow.
give yourself the permission to actually change it, or do you stay on course because well that was the course? And so if you have that flexibility and in yourself, then you might have it with other people too, and then you won't be so locked in.
Yes, that flexibility and that curiosity goes hand in hand with how smoothly you're going to ride the waves. Because without that flexibility, when we do have more and more rigidity about what we expect, what we think how it should be, that's where we create our own suffering. You
Yeah,
know,
can you turn it so into a like a real slog, like instead of like it becomes like not enjoyable when you're
yes.
there doing 105 takes when you really got it at the fourth take. If you think about that, like if you apply that to your life, and like, are you just obsessive going back and reworking something that was already done, but you're
Mm-hmm.
just locked into this loop where you have to keep on going back instead of actually accepting what it is and moving forward and having a lesson learned instead of just trying to, you know, recreate
Yeah.
it all the time.
In the book Habit Freedom, I write about these 5 relationships in breaking free from a bad habit or limiting habit. I don't call them bad habits because there's no good or bad habits. Habits are either limiting you or expanding you. And so one of the relationships is the relationship with the now, like really understanding that now in the present is all of the power, the potential, the connection that you want. Like it's all in the now. It's not in the past and it's not in the future. It's all now. And it's a really difficult relationship to master sometimes, when you were not used to it. But once we do, then that switch happens from what you were talking about, from like having an idea of what it could have been in the past to what it should be in the future. What is it right now, and how do I make the best of what I have right now with the cards that I'm dealt with right now? And moving from that relationship with the now gives you a lot of power, a lot of magneticism, a lot of opportunities, much more than clinging onto ideas from the past or ideas, anticipations about the future.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of like when you're the painter and you're on a canvas and you do that brush stroke. Like in the digital world, I can undo that brush stroke. In the old world of the canvas, I put it on there. Maybe I can mix it with another color, but it's on there. But
Yeah.
the problem we have today is we got all these tools sometimes, and people can I can undo the email I sent. I can actually call it back. I can
Yeah.
get rid of that brushstroke. I can go take AI and rewrite my thing over and over and over and keep on changing and then you never actually on the typewriter. It was harder to do that, right?
Mm,
It's like harder to do that when you're writing in your diary with a pen or a pencil. And so I think some of these tools have gotten people into these loops where they
mm-hmm,
don't get satisfied, and then the tool keeps on letting you change it. and
mm-hmm,
and so then as an artist, I always try to get people. It's like sometimes you got to let that thought be, that thing be.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just got to let it exist, throw it at the wall, and see. Because a lot of times as artists, we don't know what's good for in our own what we're doing. We have to have a lot of feedback because what we think is good is not what the fans think is good. It's not what your
Yeah.
producer thinks is good. Right. So if you self edit yourself out of your job. If you let yourself do it, because you can, because you tend to be so self-critical of your own work that you need other people to look at it and see, well,
Yeah.
that's actually good. It's a common problem I think a lot of people have.
Yeah. I often talk to my clients about how their art form or their craft is bigger than them, right? So when we get so bogged down into like, what does this mean about me? What do people think about me? Like, the me. It's quite a self-absorbed, self-involved way to go about creating. Whereas it's like, okay, well, how can I make it bigger than me, where it's of service to others, and I'm actually like giving and gifting this to the world, that really starts to shift that self-obsession almost.
Yeah, when you put it out in the world, I've talked to authors, they have beta readers. They throw it out to the beta readers. Musicians, we have the same thing. We
Yeah.
can put it into a place and we get to see what the fans and other artists think. And and a lot of people feel very insecure about that. I've talked to
Mm-hmm.
painters, they got all their paintings in their loft and they never send it to the gallery, never send it to any art director. It's like, oh, it's not ready. You're like, but when you look at it, so it looks ready to me, but I guess I'm not an expert. But like, so the idea of throwing a bandit to the wind and just being out there as a pioneer, it's hard because a lot of people I think are looking for safety. What I feel like is like you somehow think the wolf's at the door,
Mm.
and when you put it out there, you're gonna get bit and you're gonna get kicked out of the tribe. Like you're gonna be out there by yourself, and you got that fear, fear and flight, flights and fight or flight.
Mm.
You're running because like that wolf's gonna get you, and it's like this virtual wolf's gonna get you from
Yeah.
multiple things, not the physical, but that's what it seems like in the modern society. We have all these virtual wolves at the door.
Yeah, and that's about, being the gatekeeper of your own mind and really creating that mastery of what you do allow in and out of your mind. This is why I'm such a huge fan of meditation, and specifically Vipassana meditation, is because thoughts think themselves, and with a practice or a silence practice like meditation, we get to then guard our minds, like what are the thoughts we allow in and continue to entertain, and what are the thoughts we say no thank you, this is limiting me, I'd like to entertain a different thought. And so it really comes down to what are the practices that you're using, just like you use practices for building muscles at the gym. What are the practices that you're using for your mind to master your mind?
It's like reprogramming. I mean, I deal with computers, right? So we can like take a system and we can clear it out and we can actually remap it. We actually have a thing called remapping. Like we can
I have
remap.
to apologize. I'm so sorry, Phantom. Like it looks like my on 1%. So I might
Oh,
need to find a different computer. Is there any so that
yeah, that's
I
fine. We can
can
hold for a second for you to find it.
fix
You don't have a power plug.
this?
That's okay. You just okay. We can just hold for a second.
Yeah, it is in, but for some reason it's just not powering. So I gotta find another one, and I might have to restart my computer
Okay, that's fine. I'll just keep it going.
again.
Or if you drop off,
Sorry
you can
about
come back
this.
in. Yeah, you can come back in.
I've
Yeah,
not had this happen before.
yeah. Sometimes you get a
Batteries.
bad wire. If you have a bad wire, it's not or a bad plug, so you never know.
Okay, okay, I'll be back.
Okay, so we're just talking. Anna Shilina, she's having some technical difficulty at the time, but we're waiting for her to get back, and we've been having this discussion to talk about this topic here, like self-sabotage, to self-mastery, and the science of lasting habit change, which is continuing theme on our show. We love to talk to people who are in this space where people can try to have this like self-analysis, and I talk about looking glass self, but this the idea that you look at in the mirror, you look at you, and you look at your habits, you look at like you maybe take a voice memo and you listen to what you say to yourself, and you try to figure out how you can stop from self-sabotaging. And mastery, what we were talking about previously, is the idea, the athletes, they do like the 10,000 hours to get themselves, lined up to all the potential things that could happen in a game. They try to work out all their skill sets and their plans and their plays. Musicians, we get mastery of our instruments. So they bass guitar, you're not looking at the fretboard because you got the muscle memory. Well, your mind is the same way. You need to actually do exercises or be able to get the noise out. And I was going to talk about like the noise, like how do you get rid of noise? Like with meditation, exercise, taking a walk, having a like a hobby, like being a musician. If you're getting frustrated with like your boss or something, like go and play your guitar, go and play your bass, go play your horn, and then take that frustration and it will kind of weave its way of all the things that you've been feeling into your instrument and kind of give you a way to be cathartic processing of what you have experienced. It's called art therapy. I mean, I think creatives, we kind of do the art therapy naturally. The people who aren't as creative, I think everybody's creative, maybe not as creative as a creator or an artist. They need to learn different ways of doing that. And and some people, like, meditation might be too hard for them. They can't quiet their mind. So they need other ways to do it. And so breathing exercises, tai chi, walking, knitting, anything that can kind of get yourself tapping, light work. There's all kinds of places that you could find whatever speaks to you, whatever's going to work for you. Because everybody's different. So it's like this, because somebody tapping works for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Like, chanting as a Buddhist works for a Buddhist, It may not work for you if you've come from a Christian background. You don't know, you can't get into it. You just can't feel it. You'd rather be like in a church listening to your preacher. So like find things that actually speak to you and find a way to like quiet that noise. And we live in a world with a lot of noise. But here we go. I think she's back. Here we
I'm
go.
back. Thank
You're
you for your
back.
patience.
I just did a little monologue to keep it going so we wouldn't have something.
Nice. Thank you. I
Because,
appreciate it.
but yeah, you were talking about you were talking. I think like meditation. I'm a Buddhist and I chant. I'm a Nichiren Daishonin Buddha. We go Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and what I find I got into it was like it gets rid of the noise, and being a
Yeah.
musician also going onto my piano. If I had a really hard day at work and a lot of frustration, just sitting at my piano and getting into the flow state will kind of get me out of that. Right. And,
Mhm.
people have to find whatever speaks to them. They would walk in the woods, meditation, quieting, different Tai Chi, whatever works.
Mhm.
But I think you have to find something that's going to actually, you know, dissipate that noise.
I have quite a strict view on meditation. It used to be a lot more fluid and flexible, where people would say, like, walking is my meditation, or gym is my meditation, or this is my meditation. And while those things are also healthy and also help to reduce the noise, the meditation that's helped me the most is really mastering the art of stillness and silence.
Mm,
That way, we can be present with some of the deepest unconscious programming. That way, it can come up for us to see. Because if there is an external stimulus, like at the gym or music or walking, whatever it is, it helps in a different way. But it's not the idea of pulling out the deepest programming and really being able to see and nurturing that self-awareness and
mm,
self-compassion, and sitting through the discomfort, the severe discomfort of sitting still for 30 minutes or an hour. And every fiber of your being does not want to do it and does not want to be there, because you don't want to wrestle with these thoughts, because it feels like a wild animal in there sometimes. But once you do master then sitting through that and knowing that you can survive any thought that you're going to have, you can tame your mind. That is a very profound skill set. And so that's why I've adopted a more stern approach to meditation, where it's not about like anything can be meditation. Eventually your entire life can be a form of meditation, where you have a level of awareness no matter what you're doing. But for most people, it starts with mastering stillness and silence. And the world is so noisy these days. There's so many opportunities to listen to things and read things and scroll on things and be distracted, that to really master that stillness and silence is like samurai level skill set.
yeah, so that's even beyond like a chanting and like you're chanting. If I'm doing Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, I'm just doing that chant, but I'm voicing it, right? So you're saying actually sit there for the 30 minutes instead of doing Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Actually sit there and don't vocalize. Is that
There's
what you're saying?
different meditations. The mantras and the chanting are one form of meditation, and they do work. The specific one, because I've tried dozens of different meditation styles in the last 20 years. And the one that I find had the most profound effect, where it changed my life in terms of like creating lasting change with my habits. It helped me stop drinking alcohol, helped me overeating, helped me like release a lot of excess body weight, that helped me stop biting my nails, all of the limiting habits that I used to have. Is the art of, and it's called Vipassana. So it is scanning your body, head to toes and back up, and just doing body scans and noticing what are the sensations that are arising. And doing that for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And that is very uncomfortable to do
Hmm.
often. But the point is to do things that are uncomfortable. It goes back to what another relationship in the Habit Freedom book that I write about is our relationship with discomfort, because we live in a comfort crisis. Everything needs to be just right. We're all a bunch of Goldilocks running around, not really able to um, handle a lot of discomfort these days. And I'm just, stereotyping and throwing out a blanket statement. But the more we are able to master that relationship with discomfort, the more self mastery we have, the more control over ourselves we have, and the more control over our destiny and our lives we have.
Yeah, just an example. Like I know podcasters that are kind of obsessed with perfection, and they don't ever go live. They will never do a live podcast because they want to edit, they want to get all the ums out, they want to control situations. They just want it to be presented so it's like a film. Like they actually went back and did heavy edits. And I've always been more of like I rather do it like modal jazz because I'm
Mm,
into jazz and I'm a musician. So I was like, why not do it in a flow state? And if there are mistakes or there are imperfections, well, it's like that's the vulnerability of being live. But you
yes,
can
I
tell a
love that.
story in a way that to me is like it's not an infomercial. It shouldn't be as scripted because human beings, we can have this conversation. If you turn it into a conversation, it's a master class in the now, right?
Yeah.
Where in the now, well, you can't control everything. Things can happen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know that like this person is actually speaking, in the moment. And some people don't can't handle that because they want to like it's got to be perfect English, it's got to be perfect grammar, it's got to be perfect this, perfect that, and it's hard to let that go. Like there's a lot of people that they can't be in that kind of form. They can't be in that space. And I think that's interesting. Like if you get rid of the noise and even the noise of your own voice, like when I was talking about chanting, is like that's kind of radical. Thinking about what you're saying is because you're dealing with like the total quiet. I've had like music teachers say before you write a song, just don't play anything. Just sit there and don't hit the instrument, don't play the chords, don't voice anything, just be quiet. So it sounds kind of like that. I actually had a teacher that said, and I don't know if they understood what how you're using it, but they thought that was important to have the
Yeah.
quiet.
The quiet is so important. And I find that as an author, I often have to disconnect from social media input, reading, listening to podcasts, books, music, everything that I love. I usually put it on hold and for a week or two or three to create the space in my mind and to create the boredom for creativity and ideas to form and put themselves together. And without that, it becomes just a amalgamation of like all the things that they aren't mine necessarily. I mean, what's mine creatively speaking? Everything comes from everything.
Yeah.
Everything comes from some place, right? But to create that space, if you really want to be a trailblazer and you really want to create something that's never been done before, then it is crucial. And to create that peace, because that peace for that so many people are searching, that peace is not at the end of the next TikTok or the next reel or the next YouTube video. That peace only comes by switching those things off.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, right? So we only had like four TV channels, regular radio, no satellite radio, no internet. If you wanted to get a book, you go to the library or go buy a book at the store, right? And you couldn't get
Mm-hmm.
it on your phone. Um, and there was a tendency, like, you listen to music on vinyl, you wouldn't skip around. You actually listen to the whole record. And I always point out, like, when you listen to music and you listen to a whole record, you get an artist's complete thought, their worldview. They're like like a musician is a writer, and like it's almost like today people go on just getting a cliff note. They just listen to a
Mm-hmm.
song on a play note on a playlist, and they're not getting the depth of the B side or the
Mm-hmm.
deeper album track. So they don't really know who that artist is. All they got was the shiny single, which it doesn't is kind of designed to be like Uber this, and it's like it's not the deepest thoughts of that artist. So I
Yeah.
was like, how many people are missing out on deeper thoughts, things that maybe aren't as popular but very meaningful? And I talk to authors; they can't even get a book at 200,000 words. They got to knock it down to 70. People have to knock songs down from 4 minutes down to two. You have to do posts that are 15 seconds, 30 seconds. It's like, where's the attention span? Then understand that you can't get the depth of something in 30 seconds, in 15
I
seconds.
remember sending a podcast to a friend of mine, and it was a 2 hour conversation. And he just responds, he's like, oh, I put it into ChatGPT and I got the cliff notes, or I got, like, the like what it's all about. And I remember having this conversation with him, going like, well, you're missing the point. The point is listening into the conversation, because there are nuances in the way that these two people are relating, and by just going like, well, give me the highlights, we're missing that. I too am guilty. I'll find a book that I want to read, for example. And if I don't want to read the whole book, I'll be like, okay, what are the points that I need to know from this book? So I've done that with some books as well. I'm just mindful to not do it with all books and all podcasts, and to maintain that ability to have space between conversations, and in conversations as well, and not get bored of it.
Yeah, it's also that human discernment, right? Because we're kind of giving up our discernment to the computer, to the AI. So
Yes.
so so like in IT, I mean, we're guilty of it because we designed it. But like we have these situations where we're having AI transcribe our meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been a big push at with the management. Say I still need to go listen. And so why are you billing like listening to 2 hours worth of meeting minutes? I said because the AI is not always getting it right. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you got to understand you can't fully trust this tech yet. And even if I did trust it, it's like its interpretation of things isn't the same interpretation as a human being. And there's things that you miss, right?
Yeah.
The computer just is not a human, so it misses things, right? And it does really good at bullet points and getting high level things. But I went through something and it was missing all these little shaded points that in business and IT. It's like it's really important to know like the unhappy path. You
Mm.
can figure out the happy path, and that's fine. But a lot of the biggest problems in IT is the unhappy path, the thing that's not the common workflow. It's hard for it to understand, and so it will skip it. It wasn't simple for enough for it to make it a bullet point, so it just leaves it out. And that's the
Mm.
discernment of a human being. You need to actually get the full picture.
Yeah. Yeah. AI has lots of benefits, and I use it every day. And also, it has its limitations. Just today, I asked a question, because I had this idea that I spoke to a friend recently about. I was like, is sex appeal and magneticism the same thing? If you want to be magnetic, does it
Oh shit!
link to sex appeal? And I asked AI this question. They said, no, it's two different things. But then I said, but what if it isn't two different things? And then it said, but then it is two different, like it is the same thing. And so what that showed me is that it is a mirror, but it will um, it's at risk of giving you more cognitive bias and telling you what you're wanting to hear, if
Yeah,
that
it
makes
tends to
sense.
want to give you what you want to know.
And that's a big risk to
That's a
humans.
big danger because part
Big
of being
danger.
being in a human being is like, I need to know the outlying things. I need to know the
Yeah.
unhappy past. And if you just want to give me the good news, it's like I need to know the things that can break. I
Mm-hmm.
need to know the structural inconsistencies and vulnerability. It can do some of that, but it tends to not want to give me that picture. Wants to satisfy me. And that's where you get hallucinations. Like it'll give you an answer where there's no way they could actually do that, right? Because the date, it's beyond the date and it's giving you bad data. And it actually will give you an answer. It's not like a Google search. It'll actually give you an answer. It will go and say, it will actually try to theorize something and make something up. You need to call it
Yes,
a hallucination. And like, well, there are kids today that'll take that hallucination thing because the computer gave it to me. It's true. I
it's
mean, there are
true.
adults that
Yeah,
do that, and that's highly dangerous.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know people who use it as a therapist, use ChatGPT as a therapist, and I understand the appeal because it's easy and it's free, and there are some benefits, but there's also a lot of risks that come with that.
Because at the end of the day, like the computer doesn't, they can go and write a song. Songwriters, we're running into this issue where AI can go write a song. If you're very detailed in the prompt engineering, it can write a song. And the problem I have with it is it's doing it based on what it learned in the learning in the machine library. What the
Yes,
difference is with a musician is they have, Lead Belly, they had Robert Johnson. You pull from what you know, right? An artist will pull their influences into their work, but it's how they're feeling that day. It's
yeah.
how somebody said. The computer doesn't have that. It
Hmm.
can't pull all these disparate things together. It will pull known things together. It
Hmm.
doesn't pull like subconscious mind because it doesn't have a subconscious mind. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really get it. And then people on face say, well, that sounds like the blues. Well, that sounds like this. Or it sounds like pop. Yeah, and it can do it. But it's like, if you, then you say, well, we don't need human artists to create it anymore because the computer can do it.
Hmm.
And like, how dangerous is that? It's like, we don't need artists to do art because the computer will do it. It's like, do you believe humanity did not have art that's created by humans?
That's not going to happen. A lot of things are going to change, and people are going to have to be more creative, maybe in some ways, or differently creative, maybe not more creative. But I think, one of the most beautiful things that's going to happen from this AI revolution is that imperfections are going to be valued more,
Yeah.
because people are going to be looking for the ums and the r's and the imperfect makeup to go like, oh, this is a real human. And we value that because it's finite compared to the infinite data that's in a computer potentially. So I'm looking forward to how it starts to unfold for us.
Well, I think it's like a hybrid approach. Like if you use it as a tool, but I think the problem I have is when people use it 100% for any task.
Yeah.
If I look at it as it's an assistant, right? It's a tool in my toolbox. I still have my Steinway piano, right? I still have my like Les Paul. I still have my bass, right? I still have the Hammond B3. I am going to still use that with my fingers, but I might use
Mhm.
AI to do some mixing or to pull this or pull that. But I'm not going to use it to write the whole thing. I think the danger is when people say, well, I can just use it to throw fake people into the background on a film. So I don't have to hire the extras. Or I can go and use it to write the script
Yeah.
instead of having a screenwriter write the script. Maybe like you could have it help the screenwriter, but you're going to go and say, I'm going to have it be the screenwriter. That's where
Hmm.
I see the dangers are, and people will just react to those dangers because they say, "Well, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't look right. That doesn't hit me right." And
Yeah.
when more people start to say, "It's like it feels like junk food." Like, yeah, it's cool. You sometimes you want junk food. Sometimes you go and you get that thing. It's not good for you because yeah, I had a craving. But is it really fill your soul? And that's
Mm.
what I think art is what fills your soul. And how can something synthetic fill your soul?
Yeah, and so the other benefit is of what's happening with automation and AI is that we're going to have to be more and more discerning with, like you say, what is real, what feels real, and what's not. And that discernment and being able to trust ourselves and really double check, like, is this the real deal? Is this not? Can I trust it? Can I not? Is this a computer program? Is this a real human? That is a skill set as well. And that skill set is going to have to get better and better if we want to adapt into this new world that we're going into.
And regarding like self sabotage and self mastery, if you get a whole generation of young people who think the computer is like Shakespeare, the computer is like Picasso, it's like they can't even attempt to do art because the computer's going to do it better than them. Then imagine like the limitations being put on a generation thinking that they can't match the computer, and
Mm,
they really need to be taught that like or given the permission structures like the computer is not the canon. The computer
mm,
is a tool, and you are still above the computer in your capabilities, and you have to understand that we're the leader of the we're the ruler of the computer. The computer is
yes.
not the ruler of us.
Well, in writing the Habit Freedom book, which I recently released, I used AI. Like I co-wrote with Claude AI and ChatGPT. I had like sometimes three AI programs and me writing it. But at the end of the day, it all went through me. I didn't just say like write 5 ways to change habits and then publish it under my name. I really like
You're the
it.
producer. You're the leader. You're the director. And
Yes, it has
this
my whole story, everything that I've done and been through, and how I've helped myself and other people, and then like broke it down into the steps and everything. So like that co-creation is really beautiful because I couldn't have written this book 2 years ago when this didn't exist. Couldn't have written it like this. I wrote other books. This is my third book that I've published now, but it was really interesting to have that relationship with AI. And also like when I read the audiobook, this is why the audiobook, it was so important for me to create the audiobook, is because I had to be able to read it in my own voice. If
hmm
it felt like AI or sounded like AI, I'd have to change it until I could read the whole book and go like, oh, this feels like me. Yes, with some tweaks and grammar help from AI, but at the end of the day,
it's your
it's
voice.
my soul, my voice, my story, my experience comes through that is going to be able to effectively help someone change their habits and ditch the things that are limiting them. And so that was a really interesting experiment that I did recently on this topic of AI and how it helped me get this book into this world.
Well, that's they're using it as a tool, like an assistant, like as like a editing tool. I mean, we've been in the music industry. We use tools all the time now. We have tools that we used to have tape. We had to go in and cut it with a razor blade and move it around to do edits. That's what people used
Um,
to do. They used to take the tape and cut it and move it along and tape it and take pieces together. Now we can do that on the screen, on a grid, and we can actually change the value of the note. We can change the tone of the sound. We can add all these things on the digital space. But it still is. There are cases where you still want an actual musician to actually play it rather
uh-huh.
than splice it together. Because there's something about a musician playing it with the micro timing issues that
Mm-hmm.
human beings have. They're not perfect in their timing. They get really close, but sometimes that's the quality of what you want to put out, or
Mm-hmm.
it's what you don't play and how you play it with the micro timing and tonal, where you don't actually hit it exactly right, but it's right for the composition. And I think that's your voice is like the same thing, right? When you're controlling the voice of a narrative, the computer will do this. It might, make it okay. It's an okay draft, but it's not your voice. You go in and make it your voice. So you go and take the tweaks in, like the musician tweaking their thing or the painter tweaking. It's all creative. It's all creative discernment and choices we make. We make choice to leave it in, put it in, change it, whatever. But we're the one making the choice on the final edit.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly what I was sharing on the creation of the book. So yeah, I love how you related that to your experience with music.
I think it's real important to have this concept of the self sabotage really put forward, right? Because people might not even know they're doing it. They say, "Well, I don't do that," right? They might not even realize that they're doing it, right? It's like some people they just don't have that kind of situational awareness of not just what's going around them, but what's going on inside of them, right? Like so that's where like you come in with the science of the habit change and your processes, and like the quiet. The thing that I think was really revolutionary for me, I hadn't really thought about it, was the total quiet that you
Yes.
mentioned. There's probably a lot of other things, but we're kind of at the end of our conversation. But I want to thank you for giving your view of this topic, and that's what this is, a master class from everybody that we talk to. Like you relay your experiences and your way of looking at an issue or a problem, and providing solutions. So I want to
Mm.
thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Phantom. It was a real delight to connect with you and share what I know about habits and relationships. And at the end of the day, what lights me up are humans that are other humans that are lit up. We started this conversation of why I do what I do, and to come full circle, it's also lighting up other humans and other humans lighting me up, and we're co-creating this light in a sense. That's also why I do what I do. And without setting ourselves free from limiting habits, conscious or unconscious, we are limited in that. I say that limiting habits are like parasites that are feeding off our potential. And so sometimes it is difficult to be aware of it. I was completely unaware that my drinking was limiting me for many, many, many years. And I was sober curious for 7 years, and kind of knowing that I needed to stop, but not being able to, and really struggled for a long time before I came up with the formula that I share in the book. But at the end of the day, it's if we do feel limited in any sense, there's probably some habits that are holding us back. And so if there's not that awareness, that's okay. But then, like, I would just encourage people to be curious about their limits and what could be contributing to those. And one way to be curious is to create that spaciousness, like we talked about, and create that silence, so that the curiosity can give you some answers, versus just filling your day with inputs and inputs and inputs and noise and sounds and to-dos and everything. When it's so full, then yes, it is very difficult to see some of the things that are limiting us.
Yeah, that's a great point to leave everybody with. But discernment seems to be like the thing that we need to get rid of the noise, and the quiet is part of that
Yeah.
too. But thank you again for being on the show. We were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on the other platforms in this podcast space by tomorrow, and landing page will be provided so people can just pick whatever form they'd like to listen or watch podcast on. But thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.